first and foremost, I loved graduate school. I am a graduate of the University of Maryland, and I was the third cohort to go through that program, and I absolutely loved it. And so, excuse me, my phone is doing odd, strange things at this moment. Thank you. And so I loved grad school. That doesn't mean it was perfect, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go. And then the other thing that I also want to mention as we get started is that this is an international professional conference, right? Our professors are here, our former professors are here, people we work with, people we're colleagues with. So we want to open a discussion, we want it to be productive and fruitful, but if you don't feel that this is a safe space for you to engage in that conversation, but you really want to, come chat to us afterwards. We all have very different experiences, and this is why we're here, to really start this process of like, how can we get a little bit better mentoring going as those of us who have come through. So that's kind of where we are. And so I'm gonna, the other thing I want to let you know is Bianca and I decided that all five of us would sort of, I had to count because that's how tired I am, all five of us would sort of start from three questions. So the first question we asked ourselves was, is your real life, absent from your official bio? And if so, where might that be happening? And then the second question was, what has your WGS graduate education enabled you to do in your professional life, right? And that question is very focused on, all of us have WGS degrees, not certificates or not, we were history PhD students and did some courses. Every single one of us has a WGS degree. And then the third question was, what have been your strategies, successes, or obstacles for forging and maintaining sustainable intellectual communities and activist communities? So those are the three places we're starting. So we'll all talk for a few minutes and then open it up to you all. So what do I say?
We can go in any order.
Yeah. Do you want to just sort of bang that way?
Great.
Okay. Yeah, go for it.
Well, I'll get started, and I'm actually the only non-University of Maryland graduate up here. I just met these lovely feminists today, so thank you for including me in the conversation. My name is Stacia Koch. Currently, I'm the Assistant Director for Women's and Gender Studies at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois. Greatest name of a town ever. But I have a PhD in Women's Studies from the Ohio State University. I graduated from Ohio State in 2011. Since graduating from OSU, I was a visiting faculty member at the College of Worcester, which is a small private liberal arts college in northern Ohio, and I just started at ISU in July. So I'm still fairly new to my position there, working out the newness of being an administrative professional instead of a faculty member, which I'll talk a little bit about. So in terms of, so I guess that's my official bio in terms of what I do in my background and training. And actually all of my degrees are in women's studies, BA, MA, and PhD. So I've been in the field in terms of academic training for a long time. Just to give you a sense of the day in the life of my professional job as assistant director at Illinois State, my contract is an AP position, but I do teaching. 50% of my appointment is teaching, so I'm engaged with students in the classroom, and as part of that, I have to keep up with literature. I get to attend conferences like this, which is fantastic. The other part of my appointment is advising our students. We have an undergraduate minor and a graduate certificate program. And then also doing program development, because we hope to develop our program into a larger program at ISU. So any day of the week, you can find me in my office doing teaching prep, meeting with students, going out into the Bloomington Normal community to meet with organizations to develop internships for our students, or collaborate on a event for our campus community. So I will say that I love my position, even though I'm still very new in it. It's exactly the type of job that I wanted when I entered graduate school, and so I think that maybe I don't know what everyone else is going to say, but I'm definitely the good of the good, bad, and ugly attitude, because I also really enjoyed graduate school, and it has definitely prepared me for what I do now. So I'm going to skip to question 2, what is the graduate education enabled me to do professionally? And I think what my graduate training allowed me to do is really interact with students in a way that I think is honest for them. An interdisciplinary training, in terms of coursework that you take as a graduate student, gives you exposure to various different texts and theories and professors and styles of teaching that our students may be eager to experience for themselves. As a PhD student, my graduate appointment at OSU was the undergraduate advisor, which really probably should have been a staff position because it was almost like a full-time job, but it was a 20-hour-a-week appointment for a GA. But I did that for 3 years, and that was my first entry into doing administrative work in an academic program setting, and I fell in love with it, and I knew at that point in my graduate training that that's kind of the work I wanted to do. And so during my time at OSU, I took advantage of the professional development opportunities that our program had offered, but also kind of branched out to outside of our academic program to get involved in leadership development opportunities on OSU's campus, and to get involved in leadership development opportunities with the YWCA in Columbus, because I knew if I wanted to do this type of administrative work with students and in program development, the more I could kind of stretch myself and get training in the academy and also outside of the academy, the better I could serve my students in the future. I would say I'm still new in my position, right? But an obstacle that I'm facing is maintaining some sense of like an activist self while I'm in this new program. And that's primarily because I teach and work in 2 separate cities. So I have an hour commute to work one way. So I'm in my car 2 hours a day. And it's difficult, at the end of the day when you've done teaching and you're kind of mentally exhausted from engaging with students in great conversations, to also want to stay in the community and go to great meetings and then drive home an hour, right? And drive home through cornfields in the middle of Illinois. So that's the only obstacle I'm really facing right now, is how do I find time? It's not the lack of commitment and interest, but how do I actually find time to get involved productively and with intent with an organization where I work or where I live, right? And I kind of feel like I have to make that decision. Either I get involved with the Bloomington Normal community and I go home really late, or I go home early but I get involved with the Champaign-Urbana community. And they both have really rich, wonderful feminist communities because they're university towns. But I'm torn, and I'm really interested to hear how you all maybe engage in activist projects in your daily life too, because any strategies people have to finding time to carve out for activist engagement is what I'm looking for. So I'll end there. Is that great? Okay, good.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm next because she's last. Okay. So hi, thank you all for being here. I'm Sarah Tillery. I am presently an instructional dean for social sciences at Portland Community College in Portland, Oregon. And I recently took that position over the summer. And I'll run through a few things on my bio and then try to answer some of the same questions. So I graduated from the University of Maryland in their Women's Studies doctoral program in 2007. For 2 years prior to that, I left College Park and the Mid-Atlantic area, moved to the West Coast. So in 2005, and started taking jobs in student affairs, essentially, because I have a master's degree in women's studies and a bachelor's in women's studies. So like Stasia, all my sort of education is in women's studies. And was really tired of being broke and needed some kind of boundaries around my life, and having a job for 40 hours a week was one of the ways that I got some of those boundaries. So I took a job in residence life, and I've had various jobs over the years, in the last 10 years, in student affairs or student services. So I've been a residence hall director. I've done student affairs coordination for master's students in education. I coordinated community service for a private liberal arts college in the Midwest. So I've done all kinds of interesting jobs, and like Stasia, I think the administrative part and the program administration part of those positions were really appealing to me, because they offered a kind of boundary around this was the job and this is what I need to get done, and I had a start and an end and those kinds of things, and I'm happy to talk more about that later. I ended up graduating in part because I couldn't find a job for about a year, and so thought I'd finish up my dissertation and get that done, because I can only repaint the house and vacuum so many times. So did that, graduated in 2007, thankfully, and then went immediately back to work in student affairs professionally. Phone's ringing. In 2010, I again ended up unemployed and moved where my family was, which is in Portland, Oregon. Moved up there and thankfully got a job right away at Portland Community College. And I started as the District Service Learning Coordinator. And PCC is kind of a funky institution. It's the largest institution in Oregon. Its size is massive. I went to the University of Maryland and we all thought that was a big school. It's about twice the size of Maryland. So it's about 92,000 students. We have 4 campuses, 6 centers. I mean, it's inconceivably big in some ways. But the job that I took there was actually a real, I felt very lucky and fortunate. It was a melding of the work that I had done professionally in student affairs for years with the training that I had had academically. So it was a job that sort of sat in both sides of the house, if you will, between student affairs and academic affairs. And then in 2012, they offered me a job, which was a real funky job, as the Director for Allied Health Programs at the college, which was firmly in instruction. And we don't have associate dean positions, but essentially that's what it was. So I had 6 departments and 70 some odd people that I had to oversee and 600 or so students. So, and then this last summer took a job in social sciences, and now in a sort of quirky twist, have women's studies as one of the programs and departments of one of the 10 that I oversee. Some of the themes, I was trying to pull out some of the themes in my bio. I've had a lot of jobs in a lot of places. I've sort of traversed the US. I've worked on the West Coast, the East Coast, and in the Midwest. And I think I counted all total, I've been at 8 institutions in the last 10 or 12 years, and I've had over about 9 or 10 positions, different positions altogether. And some of that was for personal reasons, some of that was for fit reasons, some of that was, I was trying to make my way and figure it out, much like all of us here. And I think there's no real one path to figuring it out. To answer some of the questions, one of the ways in which my real life is absent from my bio, and that was surprising to me when I entered back into sort of the academic affairs portion of my life, was that my research and expertise in women's studies means nothing. It doesn't mean nothing. It means something, but no one really cares is what I mean by it means nothing. So I never, very rarely, I'll get asked, what did you do your dissertation on? What was your research on? So it's just not a conversation. I'm the only person at the college that has a degree in women's studies. There's a large pool of people who teach women's studies, but it's sort of, my experience has been that I became a kind of generalist in a way. And so the things that really defined my identity as a graduate student and as somebody who was in women's studies didn't seem to matter anymore. It was sort of, I just did women's studies and that was it. The ironic twist is that I have the social sciences, and women's studies is in the social sciences at PCC. And I am so, these ladies can attest, I am so far from a social scientist, it's not even funny. I was really firmly on the sort of humanities, lit, crit, philosophy track all through college, and pushed a lot in terms of wanting to do any qualitative, quantitative research or methodology. I don't know. It wasn't my gig. So it's kind of funny now that the people in my division will be like, "You're one of us," and I'm secretly like, "I'm really not." How women's studies has aided my professional life. This one was easy for. I have leveraged my degree and my training in every single job interview I have been in, which has been odd. I mean, when you're interviewing for a job to oversee allied health programs like medical assisting and medical lab tech and those kinds of things, and the person interviewing you is like, "How will you do this job?" And I'm like, "Well, I grew up with a nurse," and you're like digging. One of the things that I have leaned on over the years, and it's completely true, the training that I got in women's studies both at San Diego and at Maryland was about decoding language and understanding sort of the context in which we operate. I was, all of us, constantly sent to take courses in other departments and disciplines, required to sort of immerse yourself and get up to speed really quickly in the lingo that they use, figure out, is it like the lingo we use, is it the same, is it different, and translate all of that very quickly. So when anybody asks me the question about what are you going to do in your first 6 months, what are you going to do in your first year in this position, I always say without a doubt and with utter confidence, I was trained to get into this job, figure it out, and move forward very quickly. And it's one of the skill sets that I bring as a professional in academia. Finally, one of the strategies and successes, and I'll just talk about one, I'm sure we can all bounce off each other later, that I've used. I exist in a very sort of politically liberal pocket of a fairly conservative state. Portland, we have enough people that we sway the state blue, but it's, if you go outside of Portland, it gets fairly conservative really quickly. And so people think, oh, you're in Portland, it's really liberal there. It's also very racially segregated, and it struggles with its own problems around racism and things like that. So finding people in the community that are like-minded and do the work that I admire and want to be part of or just be in the conversation with has been one of my strategies. And I've done that at the college, sort of befriending and making collegial relationships with the director for the Multicultural Center and the Women's Center and the other folks who teach an adjunct in women's studies and that sort of thing. And then I've also stayed connected with friends and colleagues out of graduate school and go to conferences that I never thought I'd go to, like the International Studies Association conference, which is a political science conference, which is a trip all in of itself, or like the APA and things like this, and just stay connected with those folks. And we meet up there and do presentations, or we'll work on articles and sort of get rejuvenated and go back to my home, if you will, and try to continue that work. So those are my experiences.
Unless you're talking about the good stuff.
Go ahead.
Well, all right, this would be a good segue because I have a both and. The way I wanted to, that felt best and most sort of genuine for me to enter this conversation was to think about my official bio and my real life. And so one of the things that I will tell you about my official bio is that I just got tenure. And I am now Associate Professor of Women's and Gender Studies at Mount Royal University in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And it's cold there. And so I'm gonna tell you a little bit about that process, right? So one of the things, so I'm really one of the lucky ones, right? Like my story, my official bio reads like we all dream it should, right? But here's some things. So first of all, I have white privilege, right? So that needs to be clear, and it's very important that we understand that that's what's going on, right? The second is, like I said, I have tenure. And the third is that it is in, actually, women's and gender studies, which is also quite impressive in many, many ways. And it's at a public liberal arts university that is an undergraduate-only university, and they intend to stay that way, and that's partly why I wanted to be there, because I really love doing that work. And I am required, as part of my job, to do research, right? That's part of the gig. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about is that I think it's really important that WGS grad programs need to be, I think, much more honest with their students than they currently are. That my situation, my official biography is not what is normal. It is not what is actually happening. Even for those who wind up in the academy, right? So I mean, thinking about Sarah and Stasia, like these are not tenured jobs, like they're not research gigs, right? And I've been offered, since I started on the job market, I graduated in 2008, I started on the job market in 2007, I've been offered 5 full-time jobs, only one of which, the one I've accepted, has been actually a research-oriented position. Every single other one has been admin, right? And doing advising and 18 other things that Stasia, I'm sure, can chat about as well, right? The flip side, though, right, and this is where the good comes in, is that, I don't have a lot of time to do my research because I'm in a 3-3 teaching institution. And this semester I'm actually teaching 4 courses, kind of as like a pay-it-forward strategy, which is about the politics of institutions, right? The other piece of it that I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on, but I'm actually happy to answer any questions you might have, is that I'm actually the survivor, most recently, of a very traumatic tenure process. And I thank my therapist from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to talk about it as trauma, because one doesn't, I mean, I teach global women's issues, so when you think about trauma, that's not really what you think about, right? But for me, the road to tenure included anti-feminist bullying, hazing, homophobia, sexism, anti-Americanism, anti-intellectualism, and other unpleasant things. And you don't think about the Canadians in just this way, but there they are. And all of this occurred without mentorship in a profoundly chilly climate for women, gender, sexuality studies teaching and scholarship. Up until 3 years ago when I hired her, I was the only PhD in WGS in the entire province of Alberta. There was nobody to ask. There was nothing, right? And Alberta's like profoundly conservative. It's called the Texas of Canada. But I do want to shout out to my dissertation chair, Claire Moses, who was supportive, right, in that process. And anytime I called or contacted my faculty from Maryland, they were generous with their time and expertise. But the good news is that I have tenure now, and things are improving fast, and we've got a new dean. And honestly, like, what a difference a dean makes! I can't even tell you. It's shocking. So after 4 years of trying to find like a better job, whatever that means, than the one I actually have, I actually left the academy last year. There was something in me that said maybe just take a leave of absence instead of jumping ship entirely. And so I took a leave of absence and moved all my stuff back to Washington, D.C. and tried to just forget that horrible experience. But then I had another horrible experience, and so I won't even start with that. I'll talk about that in a minute. And so I said, you know what? It turns out the job I had was better, so I'm going to go back to that one and try to sort out some things. So, in terms of maintaining sustainable intellectual communities, right, networks, activist communities, separate conversations over the course of many years with Bianca, with Sarah, with Ryan, with Ayu, have kept me sane and helped me to strategize about how to negotiate some of what I've been experiencing, and to finally decide to stay in academia, in my job. And so that's been really important, right? So if you're currently a grad student, like, those people are going to be the people that you rely on as you move forward. It's so important. And as I said earlier, I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have about that horribly traumatic experience that I've just been through, but it's a happy ending, and it involves this tight network of supportive families, incredible friends, a really good therapist, antidepressants, and a very tiny 12-pound mutt named Cricket. So, so that's my life right now. The other thing I'll say too is that I'm an economic migrant. God knows I wouldn't move to Calgary unless I had to, trust me. Although I love it now, but I mean, when I got there, I was like, I've relocated to this frozen tundra of ranch land and oil and gas, and I have no family, I have no friends. At the time I wasn't partnered. I didn't even have my dog, you know. Everybody I knew lived across the continent. Every time I got on a plane, it cost me $1,000. I mean, it was horrible. I have no words, right? And so I think women and gender studies graduate programs, really I wish we could incorporate discussions about psychological and emotional health during and after grad school. I mean, it's such an important thing, and you know, and I can talk about after more than I can during, right? Because I was actually quite happy during. But that culture shock of going from this vibrant intellectual community of feminist scholars and social justice advocates to this wasteland of like full-time teaching where no one else I knew had any idea what was coming out of my face at any given time, and service and scholarship, and you're just going, right? So how can we build these networks that are yes, intellectually supportive, but also emotionally and psychologically supportive? And it's okay to take drugs, right? Like, it's okay. It's okay to have a break once in a while, and it's okay to have, you know, we don't have to be working 24/7, right? And that's, I think, an important piece. But let's talk about these bills. Remember I said I'm an economic migrant. So on a bad day for the Canadian dollar, like today, I make $70,000 a year, US dollars a year. And so 6 years out from grad school, all I have is debt. I'm not exaggerating. I got credit card bills up the yin-yang. I got a car that my father calls a ticking time bomb that I bought with my student loan money. And I've got loans, right? And I was fully funded for 4 years at $12,500 a year. So all I have is debt, and I'm 6 years out. So that's a huge problem because student loans and multiple moves, chasing work across the continent, cost money, right? And Calgary, where I live, has one of the highest costs of living in the world, not North America, my friends, but the world. And so credit card bills and student loans, and just to put it in reality, my student loan payment is $961 a month, US a month, right? So credit card bills, student loans mean I still have an apartment that I'm renting full of IKEA furniture and this car that my father calls a ticking time bomb. And also, in this week's Time magazine, right, there's this whole article about how graduate students now collectively owe as much as 40% of outstanding student debt, even though they make up only 14% of students right now. And as we all know, most careers now are going to require graduate degrees, right? You have to almost enter with a graduate degree at the entry level, so you have to go to graduate school, but only some of those careers make enough money so that you can pay back those loans, and we all know WGS ain't one of them, let's just be clear, right? And so I really wonder if we don't need to ask ourselves in the field, like, is recruiting students, most of whom, let's be clear, are women and people of color and other gender and sexual minorities who already don't make enough money in the labor market, like, is it really feminist or social justice-y of us to be recruiting more students into this life of debt, right? That I wonder, I mean, is that a social justice issue? I think it is. It's probably part of the ongoing problem. And then the last thing I'll say is I remain shocked, and I think I'm happy that I'm shocked, but I really do remain shocked by the seemingly infinite number of ways that feminist faculty can find to throw each other under buses. I mean, really. And it seems to me, I think, to be the typical oppressed group behavior, right? You can't solve the problem. You can't actually figure out what's happening up here, and so you're going to go after your buddy, and you're going to throw them under the bus. And I could say more about that, but I won't at the moment unless you want me to talk a little bit more about it. But I do want to say that women and gender studies programs have to commit, those who are hiring at all levels, and not only doctoral degree granting institutions, but at all levels, we have to commit to hiring WGS grads. You have to. Like, I implore you to commit to hiring WGS grads. So Student Kyung, you guys are hiring, hire a WGS grad. Seriously, right? You have to. And largely I say that for lots of reasons, not least of which is that what is the point of getting a WGS PhD if you'll hire a certificate student, right? We have a specific set of knowledges and skills and experiences that you can't get from, like, being a history PhD student and coming over and taking a couple classes. That doesn't translate. And women and gender studies right now is, I think, bearing the brunt of economic austerity in the choices that are made about having cross appointments. Right, so history won't hire a WGS grad, but WGS is okay with having the history grad teach WGS, right? That's not cool. That makes me insanely angry. And so obviously these issues, right, that I'm talking about are sort of clearly connected to neoliberal economic policies, increased militarization, anti-feminist backlash, so forth, et cetera, et cetera. But the academy's embedded in these structures. So how can we use the master's tools to, like, not do some of the things that you know we should not be doing. But I loved grad school. It taught me how to understand my own experiences, right? It taught me how to do what I just did, which is sort of say, how have my experiences as an individual actually been part of systems and institutions? And for that, I have a big shout out to Katie King for her classes and the many conversations I had now with her as a friend and colleague. And it also solidified my methodological and political commitments to all the stuff I teach all the time, right? Transdisciplinary, historical and intersectional analyses, global studies, social justice advocacy. It taught me to think this way and ask questions about this stuff and to write about them and to teach about them. And I would not have known any of that if I hadn't gone to grad school.
All right. Well done. I was timing you. Hi everyone, I'm Brian Shanahan, and I am the Director of Research for the Center on Youth Justice at the Beer Institute of Justice, based out of New York City. And we are a nonprofit organization that works around the country, partnering with government to affect reform in the justice system. So in real world terms, that means I feel like a researcher / consultant. So I'm in prisons across the country, working with them and partnering with them instead of against them to try to get them to affect change and reform, and trying to get that change to be staff-driven and informed by the people who are incarcerated there. So a lot of my research is inside of prisons, asking folks who are incarcerated how they would like to be treated and what kind of ways they would affect change if they were given the power to do so, and then I try to make that happen. I'm here to talk about the bad. So you heard the good, some of the good, and some of the bad. And I'm going to focus, I can talk more about my job later, but I'll focus on the grad student experience, and that's where the bad comes in. So it took me 10 years to get my PhD, and I will talk a little bit about why I think that happened, and what impact I think that had on my marketability in the workforce, or how I think women's studies as an area of study impacted my ability to find a job in the workforce. So I full-fledged lied on my application and was like, I can't wait to teach in the academy. It was like my last sentence of my personal narrative. I had no intention ever of, sorry, Sankhya. I had no intention of teaching. I always wanted to go back and do work in the community. And I got that advice from other people who had gone through the program, not our program, but had gone through PhD programs, and be like, just straight up lie, it's fine. Once you get there, you'll figure it out. And I don't think that's why I actually thought there was a paperwork error, which is how I got into grad school, because I showed up on the first day and no one had prepared me. I didn't get any mail over the summer, and I hadn't signed up for classes, and I just thought it was like a job. So I showed up at the front desk the first day, and I was like, "Hey, girls, I'm Ryan," and they were like, "Who's you?" And why are you bothering us? And that was my first. That was my first hint. That was a paperwork error. But I think that what women's studies was doing at that time was kind of picking, for lack of a better term, like an activisty person per cohort, and then not supporting that activisty person per cohort as they went through. And I was like the third cohort, and so Robin was the activisty person from the second cohort, and the first cohort, the activisty person would be Nikki. Nikki. So like a community-based person who had worked in the real world and who wanted to affect change and think about whatever topic they had been working on. They wanted to think about it more and had this naive understanding that grad school would be this time to sit back and reflect and be really critical. And then you'd come out with these letters that would allow you to make the change that you wanted to see in the world. So I'll say we've all had such interesting experiences, specifically with different people in the Women's Studies department. So some of us have really contentious relationships with one person, and the same person on this panel has an amazing mentorship relationship with that same person. So I'll clarify that, generally you're going to hate your advisor by the end. That's usually what happens. And you find mentorship in other places, and maybe that's the way that it is supposed to go. Or at least that was a lot of our, right? So our experiences. And I think what I found most disheartening from the Women's Studies, I found a lot of great things. I found companionship, peers that supported me, that I'm still very close with, and who are still my support network. But I also found that I was told time and time again, I answer to the same dean as, other traditional degree granting programs here, so get in line and cut the shit, basically. And every semester I asked if I could do an internship and get credit for it, and was done every single semester that I was in the program. And ironically, I started, doing so that means I have to do it on my own, right? So I have to go out and make these connections on my own, and those experiences actually shaped my dissertation far stronger than any of the theoretical grounding I was getting in the classroom. I'm not saying that the theoretical grounding I got in the classroom didn't complement that work, but basically I studied how states react to kids engaging in prostitution through penal systems, and I started working with a harm reduction organization for sex workers in Washington, D.C. area, and that philosophical grounding of harm reduction shaped everything that I wrote, everything that I read, everything that I presented. And so it was really frustrating to me that was never valued in women's studies, where that's where it's supposed to happen, right? Like if you were to go anywhere, it's like women's studies is where that's supposed to take place. And when I would talk to other people in other programs, they're like, that's crazy. That's I would think that women's studies would do that for folks. So that was frustrating. I think the other frustrating thing that we've all talked about a bit is that I grew up really poor and went to state school, was the first person in my family to go to college, and it was expected that I had training once I got to grad school that I did not have. As, for example, that I showed up on the first day of school with like a backpack with some pencils in it. Like, I had no context for what was going to happen to me, and there was no support for that. And I often tell people who are thinking about going to grad school, if you don't struggle with mental illness, get ready for that, because it's going to trigger your shit. And if you do have mental illness, you better up your meds. Like, this is like a really intense process, and no one will talk to you about it. So you will think that you are going crazy as an individual when really all 5 people in your cohort are going crazy, all 5 people across the hall are going crazy. But what's weird is that you tend to go crazy at different times, and maybe that's for the best. So, I can, remember walking out of, I had never been in therapy before, and walked out of one of a session with 2 professors about we had 3 comps, about one of my comps, walked straight out and walked straight to the mental health clinic. Literally, found that shit on the map and was like, where do I go? And I waltzed in, and they, of course, had no idea what to do with us either. They were like, if you don't have an eating disorder, we're a little bit confused as to how to work with this. So, and my dad had a stroke while I was in grad school, and I had to get a job waitressing, and I didn't take out loans, and there just was no space for that in a place where I thought was supposed to be home, your new home. And I'm not saying that people weren't empathetic. I'm not, that's not at all the case. People are very nice. But I also saw, and Kim nodded to this, I saw the same things that we critique happening in our department. So I could imagine me telling my story to someone. I'm seeing lots of heads nodding here, I can't believe that shit happened to you, right? And then I could always imagine, and Bianca will tell her story in a minute, I could imagine Bianca telling her story to a different department of women's studies, and then being like, we would never do that, right? I could hear professors who were doing some fucked up stuff to us. I could hear them giving different advice to other people who are outside of our cohort. So there is something weird that happens. And there's 2 sides to every story. So take this with a grain of salt that our department probably has a very different perspective of what kind of student I was or what I offered to the program. But blah, 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 I left after 4 years to come back to New York City. I was not supported in that decision. I was basically, told that I would probably never graduate if I left. And I understand it in some ways, right? Because you're not in the hallway, you're not there, you don't have access to folks. But then there was also no room made for that. And I really don't think I would have the job I have now if I hadn't left, right? So I could not have competed with the people that I see their resumes coming across my desk with a PhD in women's studies. And that's not the best thing to say, but the fact that I didn't have a PhD got me in the door at the organization, and then I was able to work my way up and then finish my dissertation and then compete. But although it's a degree in philosophy at the end of the day, and I work in a social science, hard science nonprofit. It's not rocket science, I'll tell you that much. Let me pull that curtain back and let you see the man behind. But everything, that's the other thing I think I learned about research afterwards, is that I just assumed everything I read, before I went to grad school or before I got my job was just the Bible is the gospel, right? This person knows what they're doing. None of us know what we're doing. We're all making it up as we go along and hoping you buy our Kool-Aid and then drink it. So, and this is on tape now. Wonder why it took me 10 years to get out. So that's all I would say, is that I would think about that, like, if you're gonna get a degree, a doctorate degree from women's studies, and you want to work doing research in the field to get jobs and get part-time jobs, get internships that are not teaching, that are not on campus, and make those connections early and make them strong. And part of that qualitative stuff that we all sort of shied away from in our department, we're just not strong in that. We have like amazing critical theorists, literary theorists. But now I'm starting to ramble. So it must be about that time to wrap it up. So yeah. So anyways, I was just gonna say I had a really hard time in grad school. It wasn't everything I thought it was gonna be, but it got me that job that I have now. So even though I got in the door, I wouldn't be able to get federal grants without those 3 degrees after my name. I wouldn't be able to be a PI on federal grants. And so I make accommodations for staff that work with me now that are in grad school to make sure that they get that degree, because I've seen people come into a place like here with masters and really struggle, and they just can't get promoted or it takes them twice as long to get promoted because they have to work extra hard to get that big money type of grants. So there you have it. San Canada, I love you. I was not talking about you. I knew one of our professors is in the audience. But then I would also just say, right, is that she's the only professor from our department who came. So, and it might be because people didn't know, or they had other awesome, or maybe we have other Maryland grads who are
yes, there are other
right now.
sessions with other Maryland grads.
Right, that are presenting right now. But
we spread out, and I chose this one. Yes.
You chose right.
Yes.
So thank you.
Hi, I'm Bianca, and I know it's a contradiction that all this juicy goodness is going to talk about the ugly. But that's what's going to happen. I'm going to take a deep breath, because that's what I need. So I welcome you all to do that with me. All right, so I'm not going to name any names, because people know who did what, and you are the only person who really needs to know, because you're the one who could do anything about it. So I came into Women's Studies PhD program. I was heavily recruited by the graduate director. I was at Maryland as an undergrad, so I already knew a lot of the faculty in the department. I came in knowing the campus, knowing the resources. It was like coming home after graduating from NYU with a degree in human sexuality education. So I'd already established myself as like a pretty hardcore sexologist, and while the orientation was going on after I accepted the application, I was on my way to Cuba to present in Spanish at the World Association of Sexology, which is now the World Association of Sexual Health Conference. So like, I had my shit together, I was set, right? And so I had always been raised knowing that if I wanted to create change in my community, or be seen as a sexologist and badass that I knew I would have to get these degrees, because nobody's gonna listen to a person of color talk about these topics around pleasure, sexuality, people of color, etc. So it's part of like a master plan that I had no idea what that even meant, right? I just was like, oh, a PhD, I need that. But I had no idea what that meant. And I had no idea that there were differences between a PhD. I just thought there was a PhD and MD. I had no idea of other doctoral degrees. So I was very similar to Ryan and my naivete about like, what the hell are we doing? So Ryan was the first person I met. I walked in. She had this glorious story that always makes me blush about how she fell in love with me when she first saw me. Maybe she'll tell you if you're interested. So there were already students there, and so I kind of already walked into a space that was pushing back, asking questions, challenging people. So when I saw that, I was like, cool, I can ride with them. And these are my past professors, cool. So I was talking to them the way I'm talking to y'all. And I get now, in hindsight, that I totally came off as insubordinate. But it is what it is. Because yeah, there were times where I was specifically insubordinate and I was talking back and being disrespectful. And then there were times where nobody told me to be like, Bianca, you can't be calling me by my first name in the hallway. Like, I know you grew up in my basement, but like, you gotta call me doctor whatever, Like, nobody pulled me aside and said that. So I was just running around calling people by their first names, giving people nicknames. Like, that was, like, and to this day, I'm like, hey, ETD, you gonna be here? Like, anyways, so, I feel like the Women's Studies program made me smarter. Like, I feel like I know a lot of different things. I was challenged in certain ways, similar to what Ryan shared, but I was also dismissed from the program. I guess the political term is pushed out these days. So your eyesight is not wrong. I am the only person of color up on this panel. And that was deliberate. Ryan called me and she was like, are you sure you want to do this? You're the only POC. And I was like, that's the point. We're going to, call that shit out. It's no longer my shame. Like, I was ashamed when I got that letter. But I'm not ashamed anymore. The Department of Women's Studies at the University of Maryland needs to be ashamed for not being able to claim me. So, manage that. It's not on me anymore. But I'll share a little bit about what happened, specifically like what people said to me along the way that was just ugly. So I don't even know what kind of warning to give y'all, but some nasty shit's gonna come up. And honestly, I don't know if faculty remember saying this to me or doing this to me, and I don't know if they would even acknowledge that they did it. But so I knew the three people who were guiding me. I knew the chair, I knew the graduate director who recruited me, and I knew my advisor, because I had classes with them prior to, in my undergraduate degree. Things that were said to me during the program, the graduate director told me that I should not have an intimate sexual relationship during my time getting a degree, because that would distract me. And this was from someone who was married with 2 kids when they got their degree. So that was the first thing that I was told. The advisor that I had when we were trying to set up a time to talk about a paper that I was working on, that she was supporting me in doing in all the ways that she could, would turn around and look at her Women's Studies, calendar and saw that it was during the week of Gloria Anzalua's birthday and said to me, you need to watch your weight because you don't want to die of diabetic complications like Gloria Anzalua. No. Yes. And then I had the chair of the department at the time say to me when I asked a question of similar to like internships that Ryan brought up, where they were like, Bianca, we can't teach you how to be an activist, as if I wasn't already when I came to the program. We could teach you how to be a scholar, as if I wasn't already when I came to the program. So I just laughed in her face, and I was like, look, you're the HNIC. And, and she was like, what's that mean? And that's when I was like, I believe you. So, yeah. She figured it out on my way out. But, that's a sign of, like, insubordination, I suppose. So, I took a year off in the program. I enjoyed it the first 2 years. I liked the professors. I liked that we were reading things that challenged me. I really enjoyed talking to people about the department. I felt like I was the activist recruited for my cohort, so I felt like I found a home with other activists who were there and we could have similar conversations. And also when I was like, who the fuck is Michael Foucault? Like, Ryan was like, yeah, who is that motherfucker, right? And then everyone was like, actually, the way you say it is. So we never felt ashamed for just not knowing how to speak, how to write, how to talk that language of theory. So it was a good space. When we took our first comprehensive exams, we worked our tails off. And I felt really proud in how I answered those questions, but I was told afterwards that I had a low pass because I talked too much about art and not enough about theory. And I was like, fuck that, art is theory and practice, right? Like, that's my activist pushing back, and they were like, no, it's not. So I was like, whatever, so look, I passed. So for me, I was like, who fuck cares? Like, I'm moving along. That's how you do it, right? Like, that's how you survive this type of thing. So when I was in the second year, third year, I can't remember. I know, right? Whenever Patricia Hill Collins came to University of Maryland and taught her first class, she allowed 3 Women's Studies students to take her class. Ryan and I were 2 of those 3 people. So it was a huge honor, right? You had to ask permission, and she had to grant it. And we were the only 2 people who were not, like, sweating her jockstrap because, like, people would rush to class to, like, sit, right next to her. And we were just like, I didn't bring a pen, you got one, right? Like, that was our life. And it was just real life. So my bio is my life, right? Like, I use my degrees even today. I graduated with a terminal master's, so I'm overeducated. I have 2 master's degrees. One is human sexuality from NYU, one in women's studies. And, while we were in Patricia Hill Collins' course on critical race theory, which P.S., he only gave out, like, 4 A's, and Ryan and I, Ryan and I were 50% of those. Let me make sure Ryan had one too. So that speaks, right? Because she had like 4-year into their dissertation scholars, sociology students who earned like B minuses, right? And then our tails got A's, earned A's. So during that time, my paternal grandfather had died, and it was sudden, it was shocking. My family is from Puerto Rico, so I had to take a trip, 2-week trip. And Ryan and I had already planned to come here for a national celebration that happens in Puerto Rico. And so I know all of you are here in my homeland, and I would encourage you, if you know nothing about the status of the island or the independence movements, that you do some research in understanding that, because it would be a huge injustice to like leave here without understanding. So we were coming to like understand the celebration and witness it during the particular time, which was September 11th, which was the first uprising of Puerto Rican resistance in the history of Puerto Rico. And prior to that, my grandfather died. So I came a week early. And while I was here, I was like, what the fuck? You know, I have family members who I haven't seen in years who are just dropping dead. I haven't been home in like 7 years. And I'm reading 4 books a week, and it's just pushing me farther and farther away from my family, and farther and farther away from the work that I want to do, and the people that I want to talk to. And while I was here, I got a call from my dad, and he was like, don't leave the hotel. The CIA has just murdered one of the biggest revolutionary figures of the nationalist movement in the United States. So it was like our Malcolm X. And he was murdered while we were here, and I remember sitting, it's really emotional. I remember sitting in a fucked up, messy restaurant with Ryan, our own girl, and my dad being like, don't leave the hotel, stay safe, like, I don't want you to get hurt. My parents were really radical and involved with the independence movement too. And I remember just leaving in shock, and Ryan being so mad at me at the beach the next day, like, bitch, you can't do that. Like, you gotta tell us what's going on, you gotta tell us that you're okay, like, you can't just roll out. You know, your grandfather just died, we don't know who else, you know, like, what's going on. And so that's when I was like, I need a year off, because reading all these books, writing all these papers, it's doing nothing for my spiritual, mental, emotional health. That was like devoid of anything. But at the time, the person, was I even dating? I don't even know who I was dating. Anyways, but I know that I was like, I'm gonna date whoever I want. And that was a space that helped with coping. So I went against like the graduate director's advice, right? I'm not dating. So, and I was like, I'm just gonna take a semester off, or a year off. So I finished that semester, kept my 4.0 GPA that I had over the 2 years that I was there, and took a year off and moved to New York to be closer to the movement in the States, and to be able to get a cheaper ticket to Puerto Rico when I needed it. And after that year, I decided to come back, so I reached out to faculty, and they're like, when do you come back to Maryland? And I own a home in Maryland. And I was like, I'm not. Like, I'm gonna come and visit and talk to you on the phone, send emails. You know, like what we do when I'm actually there, too. And they were like, nah, you know, you can't do that. We're not going to give you your fellowship money, because I also got 5 years of funding. So they didn't offer me that, so I had to take out loans. So I was like, I'm going to show them that I can do this, that I can produce something. And the biggest critique that I got was like, your writing is poor. You're not a good writer. I don't know if anybody else has heard that from their faculty members, but like, you're not writing for the community that you want to be a part of. And I was like, well, I am writing for the community I want to be a part of. Like, my community. And they were like, no, scholars, women study scholars, you gotta learn. And I was like, fine. So basically I was too accessible. My language was too accessible. It was not academic enough for the people who were reading my work. So I knew that going in, and I was working on this dreaded interdisciplinary paper, which is some bullshit.
The worst.
It's been the demise of several graduate students in our department. And I was working on that, and I knew that I had to get an editor to help teach me how to write in this way. And I hired a white woman, because I knew what I was doing. I hired a white woman who helped create the Women's Studies program at Columbia University. And when I met with her, and she sat down with me, she's like, all right, when's your book due? I was like, oh, I'm Bianca Loriano. I thought she confused me with someone else. And she's like, yeah, you're writing about like the testimonials of like men of color in Spanish-speaking Caribbean, how they learn about sex and blah, blah. And I was like, yeah. And she's like, when is your book due? Like, what's your deadline? I was like, this is a paper for school. Right? So I didn't even recognize the compliment she was giving me at the time, and it took me years to be like, yo, that's what she was saying to me. And she was like, and I told her, and I broke it down for her. She's like, I know exactly how to support you. I know exactly how to help you. Here are some, assignments and tasks. Here's some homework. We'll meet again. Blah blah blah. So when I submitted that paper, I felt really proud. I worked really hard. Like, I dished out hundreds of dollars to have this white woman sit and help me. And when I submitted that paper, I didn't hear back from anybody. The chair, my advisor, the graduate director. It was actually the assistant director who has nothing to do with grad students, who I reached out to and was like, yo, why isn't everybody responding to my calls and my emails? And it was the end of the semester by that point, and grades were due. And she's like, oh, the chair will get back to you. The next day, I got a letter FedEx to me saying that I was dismissed from the program. And it was because I didn't pass this interdisciplinary paper. And I knew that I had to pass it to continue in the program. They had told me that, which is why I went out of my way to get this white woman to help me do this paper. And I remember calling Ryan in hysterics, because she's one of my platonic life partners. And I was like, these bitches just fucking pushed me out. They just dismissed me. I read her the letter in tears, speaking Dolphin, and she was like, you need me to leave work and come to you. And I was like, no. And I remember sitting at my computer and just writing this 7-page letter to the provost at the time, and choosing to CC it to the provost of diversity and retention, or diversity, provost of retention, dean of the college, CCing the chair, graduate director. Like, I was like, fuck it, you want me to go? I'm gonna go down fighting and telling you all the fucked up shit you did to me. And then, because I don't just make complaints, here are the things that you can do to change this. So their main thing was that your writing sucks. I was like, there's no writing course to teach us or to help us. Like, we would have to go to the English department, and that's not even the degree that we're getting. That's not even like the community that we're going to be talking with. So it would be different if like Sarah, who was in the humanities, went to like the English department for a course to learn how to write, but she didn't need to because she knew how. So I was like, create a women's studies writing class for us. Like, make it one of the courses, make it 1 credit, I don't care. That didn't happen. And I gave examples of other PhD programs that offered specific writing classes for their department and their students. And so I did that. And here's the problem. A majority of the faculty at the University of Maryland are still women of color. And when you're at a place at the University of Maryland where faculty of color are like minimal, they're all homies. They know each other, they're tight with each other, they have each other's backs. So the provost of diversity was a black man. The provost of retention was a black woman. And they were, homies with like the chair, with my advisor, and with the graduate director. So all 3 people who worked together to send me this letter, which when I get policy, you're supposed to get a call, and you're supposed to be told what's going to go down, and then you get your letter, and then whatever else. I didn't even get any of that. People just ignored me. And then nobody ever talked to me again. And then, I don't even know who to blame for this, but then they gave me Fs in all the courses that I was registered for. So I went from a 4.0 GPA for 2 years, and then I got 3 Fs on my transcript. So it dropped my GPA to 3.5. And talking to my dad, he was like, he came to the States from Puerto Rico, and this was before English was one of the official languages. He was like, B, we can hire somebody. Like, I hired somebody to translate all my papers into English. Like, you can hire somebody to write your dissertation too. Bless his heart. I was like, that's kind of illegal. And he was like, I understand, you have a 4.0. How can they, dismiss you? Like, I understand. If they don't like your writing so much, why do you have a 4.0? You wrote all those papers. And like, how do you explain that to your family, right? Like, what I say to my dad? He's like, why isn't my daughter's work good enough? What do I say? So this is just an example of how, like, this program pushed me farther away from my family. It pushed me farther away from, like, the people who love and support me. And I'm crying because, like, my mom's in a nursing home here. She is a mass, she's Alzheimer's, she can't remember me. So it's like, it's a lot. It just pushed me away from my family. And they were just like, I don't understand what happened. And my dad was like, sue the college. And I was like, well, whose money? Lawyers are free? And then the omnibus person contacted me. And she was like, are you thinking about legal action? And I was like, I did the action that I was going to do. I wrote that letter. I sent it to all the students. Thanks. And everybody knew. Like, I was like, this is what happened. They're probably not going to talk to you about it, but this is what went down. And I was like, look, I'm not going to sue the college, but what you can do is get my grades changed, because that's some bullshit. If they think that my paper wasn't quality work, well, then give me the work that I earned for that paper. You think I did C work? Give me a C, but don't fail me. Like, it's not that I didn't produce work, right? So it's the ethics, the principle of it. And so the omnibus person had to do that work. And she did it well, and I was like, thanks, but I don't have anything else that you can help me with. And then nobody ever talked to me again until Ryan's dissertation defense 2 years ago. And Ryan, as you can see, we're like spiritually bonded in many ways. Prepared for a dissertation, I was like, all right, I got a dress on, I'm gonna be good, and I was. And she was like, nervous for me. She's like, what if Bonnie Thorntondale talks to you? What if like other faculty members are gonna be there? What are you gonna say? Are you okay? And I'm like, bitch, do you have your presentation together? Like, we're gonna call your brother in Fiji. Like, do we have that together? Does he know the time zone difference? Like, it was really, she was just thinking about me. And just like in the hallway today, she's thinking about me. She's like, let's take a deep breath. And, so it was devastating, and I had a lot of shame because that's your whole life for like 4 years, right? Well, the 4 years I was there was my whole life. And your life just changed. It goes away. You have that whole identity, that whole space just removed. And one of the best things that has happened with that experience was I not only saw racially white people stand up and have my back, so Kim was the first person who was like, what the fuck does my degree mean if Bianca can't earn one too? And to this day, nobody has the answers to that. But that was the first time I was like, yo, cool, right? And they were just up in arms. And then you have like the administrative assistant who just had her daily absence aversion. She left my name on the graduate student office for 4 years. And other graduate students who came in reached out to me and they're like, are you this person through social media? And after I was pushed out, another black woman who I was down with was also pushed out because she also didn't complete her interdisciplinary paper. And I spoke to her last winter, and she was like, I was pushed out like 7 years ago, and I haven't talked about it with anybody. I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, nobody knows what went down. And I was like, it's not your shame anymore, like, you gotta heal from that. And she was like, you're the first person I've talked to since it happened. And this happens a lot. Like, that's what I've learned. There's a lot of people who have been pushed out of programs, and they're just not talking about it, they're silent about it. And I'm like, if that's what I can do with this degree, that's what I'm gonna do. So today, I'm pretty successful, underemployed. So if you wanna hire me, I got my cards. And to be honest, like if you have a program around like Latino feminist thought or like feminist theories or whatever, like I can do that in an accessible way, right? Like I can make things accessible, enjoyable, interesting, because I was interested in that stuff too. And the field has evolved a lot in the past several years since we were in school. So that's a good thing. I feel smarter. I feel like I have a solid community that still has my back. So the fact that Kim even thought about me to do this panel speaks volumes. The fact that everybody here was going to support me, knowing what I was going to talk about, speaks volumes. I think that I've gotten the jobs that I've gotten because I have several degrees, so I'm kind of overeducated. And I see how like that affirmative action thing works because like, wow, this woman of color over here who speaks Spanish and blah, 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 is doing this. But I've created a lot of virtual spaces like the Latinegros Project, which is a virtual space to increase representation of Black Latinos. I'm working on a film with my partner around the intersections of Blackness in the kink community. It's a documentary. So I'm doing a lot of media-related things, still in my field of sexuality, sexual health, sexology. I co-founded the Women of Color Sexual Health Network. Like, I'm doing some dope shit that's just not being funded. I have an amazing survey that I'm trying to do around Black identified Latinos and our sexuality and our sexual health needs that I just can't find funding for because I'm not affiliated with a college or organization. So really amazing revolutionary stuff, and there's no money to do it. So yeah, I can answer your question. We can all answer your question after that. So thanks.
Thank you. So we have about 5 minutes. We really do. It's fine. This is what this was supposed to be for, just to start the conversation, right? And so if you have questions for us or comments or your own experiences to share, testify, whatever you need to do. So go.
So I'm an undergraduate student at Iowa State University in the Women's and Gender Studies program there. And I really do want to go to graduate school. So with all of your unique experiences that you obviously have, what would be your recommendation? Would you recommend me or anybody that wants to do the same path to do that, or just pursue something else?
Well, which path is it that you'd like to pursue?
PhD in women's studies.
Yeah, but then what do you want to be when you grow up?
Professor.
Well, you got to do
There you go.
Well, do you want to teach or do you want to do research?
Yeah.
Or do you want to do both?
Both.
So you got to talk to Kim.
Good talk to me. Yeah, you got to do it, right? I mean, like, if you want to be a professor, you got to do it, right? The problem is, of course, is then you get to some of what I started to talk about, and what I'm hoping will continue to be part of the conversation is that WGS programs aren't hiring us. You know, there's a lot of reasons why that's happening, and they're complicated in their institutional structures, and they're also about, there's a lot of complicated things, but that right now is not happening. And I mean, I can, right off the top of my head, name you 5 instances, probably more, in the last 2 years in which disciplinary scholars have been hired for WGS jobs, right? So, and I only know because I'm still trying to find a better job than the one I've got. And I love it, but it's cold there. So you know, and that's the facts, that's the reality. And so until you and all of us start lobbying for folks who are in positions of hiring, right? I was on a committee 3 years ago, and I absolutely fought to hire a WGS grad. Now there are 2 of us in the province of Alberta, right? Teaching women's gender studies, but that's it. That's it. As long as you know the realities of it, do what you gotta do.
And I would also investigate the school years, all the schools you're intending to go to. I mean, I went for all the same reasons. I was like, they gave me a class to teach when I was a master's student. I was like, oh, I'm hooked. That's it. How do I do this? And I similarly resonate with some of the naivete around graduate school. I had no idea what I was getting into, none whatsoever. And so they were like, you need a PhD? And I was like, oh, I'm going to go get one of those.
Yep, exactly.
And left after 5 years, and 7 years total of graduate school with 5 years of my doctoral program. Left because I was like, you know, Maryland's a great school. It's a Research 1 institution. I in no way wanted to be a Research 1 tenure track faculty person. That was not my gig. But I didn't know you could get degrees in other things. I didn't know about an EDT. I didn't know about administrative jobs. I didn't know. So like, ask and investigate and make sure, and know that there are other things you can and do, and a variety of options.
Real quick, if you're committed to a PhD in WGS, Smith College has a great page that they constantly update with all the graduate programs, PhD, joint JDMA, graduate certificates, international and domestic. So it's a good resource if you're committed to going to a WGS program.
Thank you.
We'll start.
Okay. Thank you all very much. This is more just a comment as opposed to a question. I think that what you presented was fantastic, and there's a lot of emotions that like you present for even a person like, I'm a political scientist, but I focus on women's studies. Like, so I understand the disciplinary, like, but I can't work in political science. I don't do that, right? So I completely understand that, but.
And I can't work in political science either, even though that's also what I do.
Exactly, right? I can't do
So
it.
it sounds like political science has a problem.
They do. They definitely do. Completely agree with that. But like just everything that all of you have said is just completely resonated, and I feel a lot of what you're feeling. So thank you very much.
So I hope that maybe if I ask this, you guys feel comfortable answering honestly. But looking back at your experiences and everything that you went through, would you do it again? Would you pick a different major? Would you honestly do it? Or would you just say, screw it and walk away? Like today, if you had to do it today.
I wouldn't do it. I'd have gotten a second master's degree and gotten a job, and I wouldn't be $78,000 in debt, paying more in student loans than I do in my mortgage.
Well, you have a mortgage, look at you.
That's very recent. It was super cheap. But I also don't work in an institution that requires a doctorate degree. So at a community college, it's not required. Most of the deans don't have doctorates. So a handful of them do. Most of my faculty don't have doctorates, but a handful do. So it's advantageous for sure, but there's no perk for me in it. So personally, I haven't seen the ROI on it, and it's, I'm 7 years out of graduation. So I don't know about the rest of you.
I want it to be better. I want to go back and do it again and have it be better. Like I want it to be better for other students. So I think that it's still, like I didn't take out loans. I swear my tombstone's gonna say it never occurred to me. Like it never occurred to me that I could even take out a loan. I don't know why, but like it just never occurred to me. But on the opposite end of that, like I worked 3 jobs. I was slinging Malaysian food and like working at a queer bar, and so that also hindered my ability to move forward in the program. But I don't know. So I mean, I honestly couldn't have my job right now without those letters. But I wish that was different, and I wish grad school was different. Like I wish people could get the job that I have without the degree. degree, and I wish that grad school was different for people.
Oh, I would, but mostly because I can't imagine how my life narrative would look like otherwise, because I'm not that creative. Because, as I think I said, my PhD has benefited me, and I'm in a position that makes me happy. The only thing that sucks about my position is my partner has to work close to their work, and so we have to live closer away from my job. The commute's the only thing really that stinks, but I would do it again.
I don't know if I would do it again. I feel like I could find a reading group and use a library card and continue on the path that I was headed. But I also recognize that I would have lost a lot of the things that I still have, which is really important to me. So like friendships, companionship. But I feel like the knowledge that I gained and acquired during that process, I could totally have gotten that another way.
So a lot of you said you wouldn't do it again, but still want to hire PhD graduates within women and gender studies. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, graduating in May, but my doctorate is in kinesiology, but my concentration is women's sport and women in shooting evaluator. So I want to teach women and gender studies with the intersectional approach, where you would encounter highly. So like I feel like there's, we started off interdisciplinary, but we want to have a PhD, so I don't know. What do you do?
There are jobs.
Oh, for
There are
you.
jobs.
Fine,
They're all.
Yeah.
but
Like I'm in the process now of trying to figure out if we hire a single full-time position in women's studies. And the way we do qualifications for instruction at the community college level, you have to have a degree or some kind of comparable work experience. But all the departments have their own instructor qualifications. The faculty, however, want to hire 2 positions and split them. So have like a psych women's studies, which means then the person who's hired has to qualify in psych. I currently can't qualify to teach sociology of gender at the college I work at because I don't meet the instructor qualifications for sociology, things like that. So it's sort of one of those things, and I don't know how it's going to shake out, and we kind of keep having this fight about what's worked, but
yeah, luckily I've been at GA at West Virginia University 1 year. This is my 2nd year for women and gender studies, so I've taught 3 5 courses. It's been great, and then I taught 4 PE and coaching for 4 years. So this is my 6th year at the GA.
Yeah.
So I've been teaching at college level, but
Well, I think go ahead. No. I think what's also important, right, as we sort of wrap up, is to think about the bigger context in terms of economic austerity. And this is like sort of a drum that I'm beating, because it really, we have to always ask this key question that we all learn when we have our WGS degrees: who benefits from our experiences? Who doesn't benefit from our experiences? Who benefits from exploiting your labor as a GA? Right?
my department's been awesome, so I've had great
I
experiences.
loved graduate school too, I'm just saying. Right? And so you have to think critically about where your program benefits. It's like women got the right to vote because all the men died, and they needed and the United States decided that, we have to figure out some way to replenish the democracy, right? I mean, this is like the standard story. So who benefits from this stuff? We sort of have time for one more quick one, I think.
Well, I would just like to make a comment. It was just to say thank you all for sharing, but also specifically thank you for sharing numbers. I know that's really sensitive, but it's also extremely important and really useful. And I think that you raised a really good point about the ethics of recruiting, especially heavily recruiting students who are investing not only obviously a large chunk of their time, but also a large chunk of change, which they may or may not have, to dispose of, and then where that leaves them economically situated afterwards. So I just want to applaud that. It takes a brave person to put their numbers out there, and I very much appreciate it.
Well, I'm from the working class, Ryan and I talked about that a lot, and that's what you have to do, because it's so not recognized. There's not an analysis of class that I think is particularly useful in the work that we all do, and it's really important to just be very honest about where we are. Anybody have any final thoughts?
I just want to thank you all. We sort of maybe emotionally threw up on this table. Clearly we're working through some things. So thank you for supporting us and making a space for that, because looking out at the audience was really supportive. So thanks.
And there's a panel right after this, ours, that sort of follows on the conversation and really focuses on junior faculty and what our junior faculty sort of negotiating as they take up the WGS charge in their own spaces. So I encourage you to join that conversation. It's quite related. Thank you.
I have one
question before the panel leaves.
Oh, yes.
Have any of you asked if the academia field needs to be addressed and be more supportive of all of their disciplines?
Well, now, this is my mom.
I get so frustrated.
Mom and Dad cannot understand why I have the highest degree available on the history of the planet, yet I struggle with these issues that I've just talked about, right? And so we all are talking about that. That is, we have this conversation always. Wow, you're gonna let people go.
Thank you all.
Are you going to